Welcome back, everyone. It is Wins Above Fantasy, episode 143. Today is Thursday, June 20th. I'm Van Burnett, joined as always by Steve Giswelli. Stumbling out of the blocks a little bit here, Steve. Had to get the recording software up and running, but we got a great show ahead for anybody joining us on the live stream. Welcome. This is a mailbag show in addition to hitter trade targets. So if you guys have any mailbag questions, by all means, throw them in the comments on the live stream. But we got a few in the hopper and a great show that, it's kind of getting into trade season, Steve, where we're close enough to the start of the year where there's still enough time to make a lot of impact, but deep enough to where people, it seems like, are getting a little impatient, or they know that they're just, sometimes you look at even production lines and you're like, I know they've been solid, but I'm just not vibing with them on my roster. It seems like you kind of got your favorites and the ones that you're ready to move on from. So we're going to be talking about all of that. And you guys are more than welcome to join in the chat. So hit us up there. And as always, you guys can follow us on Twitter at WinsAbovePod. That's where we do the live streams every Wednesday night. I'm at Van_verified. Steve is at Stav8818. But Steve, here we are, episode 143, right in the heart of June. How's it going, man? How's the fantasy season?
It's good. It's good. I like you out of the gate had to scramble to get my recording software. Usually we do a check before that,
Yes.
before
Spoiler alert, Steve, I didn't get it in time, so you're gonna have to help me out on the StreamYard one. So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
it's
I mean,
behind the curtain talk, inside baseball.
You're good. We should be good here. If not, it'll be a YouTube only. But yeah, knock on wood. That's not the case. We're fine. Yeah, and we're at the point of the year where I know we have some mailbag questions, and I'm not that we're scrambling for topics, but we've done what 12 or we're 12 or so shows now on a weekly basis since like the middle of March. So yeah, it's always great to get some questions. We got some good ones in. And then also for our other topic for the first half of the show, kind of was inspired by just the stuff that I've been reading, which is pretty much the case, but no surprise, Saris is a big inspiration. His article last week about like a secret sauce to finding buy low hitters and hitters who improve in the second half. But I know we did a show similar to that a few weeks ago, but what also made me want to dive back into this topic was a great post on Substack by Sky Kalkman. He is on Twitter. I'll pull up his Twitter handle here in a second. I'll also link the Substack in the post in the show notes, as I normally do when we reference articles. But he basically just had an article approaching trading, and I thought that why not combine the two as we enter trade season. There was also another, I can't remember who I saw on Twitter posted. It's like, now's the time to trade. We have 2 months of data. Everyone knows how their teams, where their teams are performing well, especially in roto leagues. It's funny because most of the roto leagues I play in, there's no trading in NFBC. All of the other home leagues and stuff where there is trading, it's head to head, but it still can apply. So I think it'll be a good topic to sort of mix the two to try and find hitters to target in trades, because that just seemingly is what everyone is in need of this year, especially. And it may be hard to trade away hitters, but if you have certain guys in mind that may not be at full market value, or guys that you're willing to pay up for that are worth it, maybe there could be something that inspires a listener to make a trade, which is the goal here. I love trading. I love when other people trade. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm giving us a free pass, Steve, after, again, the tour de force that you lined up of podcast guests there. We've had a couple weeks where we can kind of exhale and have a loose show, which at the end of tonight, when we open it up to the mailbag, it'll be fun bouncing around. But to your point, the Substack that you shared from Sky Kalkman that you're going to link out, I had not read that, Steve. I had not seen it, but I did read it once you added it to the rundown. Great piece, and it feels a lot like in the space of what we've talked about on past trade shows, that I think you've been a huge advocate of, Steve. And to paraphrase it and completely oversimplify it, it's don't try to win a trade, don't try to fleece a partner. What the idea is to help both teams, to do a win-win. The rest of the league will lose out if you guys both help your teams.
Yeah.
This article, which by the way is written fantastically, this guy's got a great writing style, but very directly kind of calls out a lot of things that people take into trade talks, where it's like you feel mysterious and you feel like you're playing a game of poker and you don't want to be honest and you want to, have this like mustache twirling vibe about a trade talk. And it's like, that is not going to yield any results. What is going to yield results, which he calls out, is to be like bluntly honest, to be totally transparent about how you value their players, how you value yours, and to ask them, is there a difference in how I'm valuing my guys versus what you value them? So I thought it was really like poignant. And a lot of the stuff in there was, stuff that feels where we've been, but honestly hit it even harder when it came to like quantifying the value of certain players on another manager's team, or just, I think even asking the question very honestly of like, hey, it seems like you need strengths, or you could use improvements in these categories. Here's what I have to offer. Here's what I think, if you're interested in that, here's what I think could work. Do you feel like that's off base? Like, I don't know. I feel like I go down that path, but never fully unpack it like that. But I want to hear you talk about it. And then, of course, we'll get into actual buy highs and buy lows and everything. But it was a great Substack article. So cheers on the share out there.
Yeah, on Twitter it's at Sky SKY _ Kalkman KALKMAN. And he does a lot of great stuff as far as like modeling and has been writing articles exploring the Seeger metric that we talked about from Robert Orr over at Baseball Prospectus. So yeah, he is a super sharp guy. Eno's mentioned him a bunch of times. A bunch of other podcasts have mentioned him, and prominent fantasy writers and analysts interact with Sky all the time. So shout out to him and all the work that he does. He's a great follow on Twitter and Substack if you're into anything as far as baseball or fantasy baseball related. So yeah, we also, and I think we do one every year, but we did do maybe a year or two ago like a how-to trade show. Like that was just the topic, and like we approached like how to properly approach a manager and make a trade, and what your mindset should be. And not to toot our own horn, but when someone as smart as Sky has a lot of those points in his article and talks about that, like it's like, all right, hey, we were onto something. I think the biggest thing that we talked about was how it's not a zero sum, and like both teams can get better. And he made a great point that that we didn't make, and that was kind of eye-opening to me. It's like, if you make a trade and both your teams get better, and you're in a 12-team league, there's 10 teams that that aren't benefiting from this. Like it was a really great way to look at it, and why I think that it's so important to approach a trade from the other team's perspective. And I know when we did the show, we got some pushback on why that shouldn't be the case. I forget who it was. It was a great interaction too.
Yeah, like why would you not try to win a trade? You're out there to win a league.
Exactly. And I get that, but I don't think you're going to find the consistency in trades or make enough trades to do that.
To me, what comes to mind,
a better fantasy player.
What comes to mind there is the Rounders quote: "You can shear a sheep many times, but skin them only once." And I think that's like, yes, you might win a trade and feel great and win the battle, but I don't know about you, the managers who I've been able to trade with in my home league, there's goodwill there. Like when
there's
I
a good rapport.
out,
yeah, you have like there's
teams
teams in my home league that I just have good rapport with and make trades every year. And sometimes I come out slightly on the lesser end, but
it's business, man.
It's business, man.
If I trade somebody who tanks or gets injured, I'll send them, my condolences and say, listen, and sorry about that.
Yeah. You want both teams to do well in a trade. And I think that having that perspective that both teams are improving and 10 other teams aren't improving from this trade is a really great way to put that into perspective. And then another point, I don't want to ruin the whole thing, and I want you guys to go out there and follow Sky and read this article. But I think I am successful in making trades happen when I do list players in tiers and say, okay, here are my top 3 starters. That's tier 1. Here are my middle 3. That's tier 2. Here are my bottom 3. That's tier 3. And like, I'm willing to give up a guy from tier 1 for player X, but for player Y, I'll give up a guy from tier 2 and just work from that. Like, I find that sending out your values helps facilitate and get the process done. And just putting all those cards on the table rather than trying to like, oh, hey, yeah, at first I'm going to offer this, but then when he comes back, I'll offer, a more, I'll improve my offer once that one's rejected. Like, I just don't think that's it. Like, I don't think that's a good way to go about, like, because you're essentially trying to get one past someone. Then, if that's the case, like maybe they accept the first offer, sure, but I don't think that's going to be productive in the long run.
I think
for trade relationships.
It's like visually, you should picture both of you standing at a whiteboard together rather than sitting at like a chess table together. And that's like the big shift. And it's like to me, Steve, the segue to the first half of the show tonight is knowing we're talking about like buy highs and buy lows. My question is always, what's like ethical and how much of that do you pull into the transparency? Like, do you fully give them the reasons, or is it just like, hey, I like, XYZ is a buy low and I'm willing to trade for him if you're open to that? Or do you not even mention it, because as long as you're honest with them about how you value them and what their strengths and weaknesses are versus yours, then it doesn't really matter how much rationale you give them about why you want that player?
I again go to putting yourself in the other person's shoes and the other manager's shoes. Like, if someone comes to me for a player that is underperforming, I know that it's a buy low. Like, you're not you're not like Matt Olson comes to mind. It's like, I know I'm not selling high on Matt Olson if I trade him right now.
So you might as well be
also like I could also understand, like, I still may be willing to trade him because there's obviously not as much production as what the draft day cost was.
Position in the league,
position in the league. If you have another first baseman or something that could fill in, that's doing well that you added, or just the fact that it's been frustrating to own him for 2 months and you just want to change something up. And if you can get fair value, for him, it's still something that could happen. So I don't think I don't think you're hiding anything by not saying that. You don't necessarily have to say, hey, I'm trying to buy XYZ Matt Olson low.
I don't think it needs to go as far as being like, I love the O swing. It looks like it's, but I think it's kind of obvious that, like, hey, I think we could see a bounce back here. That's why I'd love to deal him, but I know it won't come cheap. Here's who I'd be willing to give. So anyway, with that said, Steve, I'd love for you to kind of hit on the Eno Saris article, because I have not read that one. So give me the rundown on that. And then I know you've got a nice spreadsheet chart here that's got some of the buy highs, buy lows. I think per usual, we'll do kind of what we've done in the past, low hanging fruit on some expected stats versus regular stats to date, or actual stats regular season to date. But I'd like for you to give us one more setup before we get into some of the names on buy highs.
Yeah. So it was an article that put out on Friday, this past Friday, basically just going into underlying process for hitters that should improve in the second half. And the lens that he put that through was looking at last year, players who were hitting the ball hard, swinging in the zone and not out of the zone, and had a good barrel rate. So hitting the ball hard, having a good sense of where to swing in the zone, and hitting the ball hard in the air. And last year at this time, or at least in the first half, there was hitters that were underperforming that had these good process stats. And the names from this list were Wilson Contreras, Ryan Mountcastle, Tristan Casas, Francisco Lindor, and Bobby Witt Jr. Specifically, I remember having Wilson Contreras last year. He was one of those guys where his Avant page was bright red, and the results, and I'm sure you are familiar with it too, as a Cardinals fan, for the first half were abysmal. And I remember Derek Van Riper and Saros on Rates and Barrels talking about how this is an imminent bounce back. He's doing everything well. It's all the process. It's there. And what do you know? He had an unbelievable second half that carried over into the first month of the season. Unfortunately, had that injury, but it was just a great example, at least one that stuck out in my mind, where this guy was doing everything well and improved in the second half. Basically, and again, I don't want to spoil the whole article, but there was like 9 guys on the list last year, and every single one of them improved unless they were like sent down too early. So if they literally lost their job, they didn't have a chance to improve. But all of the guys on the list from last year in the first half improved dramatically in the second half. And then he goes over some of the guys that have this process that should improve in the second half, and some of the guys that come to mind that are on the list. We're not going to talk about all of them, and again, I don't want to give away all of them. I want you guys to click on and read Eno's work and listen to their podcast. But it's like Julio Rodriguez, Austin Riley, Manny Machado, some bigger names too. That again, I don't think it's that like. We could talk about good process, but to trade for Julio Rodriguez, like the second or third overall pick, you're not going to do that. Same thing with like Bobby Witt. Like he wasn't really a trade candidate last year, and we saw the improvement. Hot take: I think we'll see a similar second half for Julio Rodriguez than like we did for Bobby Witt at this point last year. I think Julio's just waiting to break out in the second half, like he's done for the last 2 years. But yeah, that's the process, and that's sort of it was actually really similar to the show that we did a few weeks ago, which again was kind of flattering. It's like, all right, hey, we got a good process to find underperforming hitters. We focus more on like lesser owned hitters, if I remember correctly, and this is more just in general. But yeah, I sort of took that process and built a sheet to not only find guys that are struggling, but guys that you could trade for that are performing well, that you can believe in quote unquote buy highs.
Yeah, no, I agree that the buy low show we did 3 or 4 weeks back, maybe it was longer than that. I feel like I've been just noticing some of these guys like breaking out slowly, and it's like, okay, that's validating. So yeah, that'll be again always interesting to go back to the shows later in the season and see what names we were kind of circling that have been basically the right calls throughout the way. So looking at the spreadsheet, Steve, we got some conditional formatting here with the green, and that is generally is the process good, but the way that the whole table is sorted is basically by WRC plus versus projected WRC plus. And then there's a column as well that sorts the differentiator there. And am I right in saying that anything that's red is a buy high, or anything
you want green? So you want guys with the most green across the board.
But that's buy lows and highs, right?
Yes. Green is good for both the buy lows and the buy highs. I got the Excel sheet shared up here on the screen here for the live stream audience. So yeah, anything green is good. Anything red is bad. So like for O swing, like a lower number is better. So that's green if it's lower.
But talk to me about the projected. How do you, because of course, green, good, red, bad. Like coming in with a grade school mentality here, but on the projected WRC plus, if they are, I guess, how do you split between a buy high and a buy low?
So it's just the difference between your projected WRC plus, and that projected WRC plus was from the Bat X. So you're basically saying that Jerkson Profar is outperforming his projected WRC plus by 80 points, right? But I'm still seeing him as a buy high because
that's what
all of his process are good. Like he looks like the best hitter on this sheet, right? Like everything. There's
Gotcha.
not
Yep.
one drop of red on his process sheet that I have saved down there from Fangraphs, from a custom Fangraphs leaderboard. So yeah, that's just sort of, obviously players, and this is sorted by WRC plus in the first, half of rows, guys that are performing well. So you want to call them quote unquote buy highs, and then on the bottom half, those guys are underperforming and have low WRC pluses. Those are the buy lows.
So there it is. So the buy highs, that's what's really interesting to me, is these guys are actually overperforming, but we're still saying we like the process here. So I think that's where, again, looking at like trade talks, to me, that, if it's a savvy manager, they're also probably going to be recognizing that they're kind of playing above their head. And if you like what they're doing regardless, then it makes it all that more interesting to target. So to go through some of the buy highs here, we've got Jurickson Profar, Marcell Ozuna, Jordan Westberg, Christian Yelich, Ezekiel Tovar, Ryan McMahon, Andy Pages, spelled Pages. Of course, my home league didn't like that pronunciation. Then the JD Martinez and Christian Walker round out the buy high. So across these names, Steve, what's interesting about these guys is when I think of buy highs, I think of like the studs, right? Like top 5 rounds, things like that. These are a lot of guys that, with the exception of like Ozuna, maybe Yelich, feel like very attainable trade targets for the most part. What's jumping out at you when you look at this list of guys?
What's jumping out at me is that I think that there's a certain way to go about trading, and I didn't really include any, like Aaron Judge, like that's a buy high, like of
Obvious,
course,
yeah.
and I wanted to keep it somewhat attainable, right? Like these are guys that I think that you actually can trade for, just because I'm not giving up Judge or Soto. If I took him, or Ohtani with the first pick, it's just not really happening unless it's like a dynasty situation where that player has him and the rest of their team isn't doing well. So I kind of kept it to guys that are obtainable by trades. And I also think that there's a buy high aspect in that it's hard to trade for guys like Westberg and Profar that were either drafted super late or picked up in shallower leagues. But I consider them buy highs because you still can trade meaningful assets for someone like these players because of these process that are going on under the hood that shows you that it is real. Sure, it's a little different for guys like Yelich and Westberg, and even like Ryan McMahon or JD Martinez, Christian Walker, that group, because they did come with a high draft day cost, and I still consider them a buy high because they're doing well. And that's sort of how you need to approach it, right? It's hard to give up an asset that's performing, especially in this hitting environment. But everything with these guys is telling me that it's real, and you can give up valuable assets to attain them. And hey, they might be, you might not be as attached to Jurickson Profar, who is performing amazing, as you are attached to your Aaron Judge, if you have him on the same
Gunnar
team, right?
Henderson,
Yeah,
something like
Gunnar Henderson, sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I think these are like across the board. I mean, Pages might be one that, like, that's a deeper league.
That's
But
an
if
ad,
he's
yeah. And
available,
that could be an ad. He may be the one guy that's not necessarily a trade target on this list.
because he was kind of a drop candidate, but like the zone swing looks really good for him. It also looks really good for Ezekiel Tovar. But Tovar also has a high O swing, which is, overall just
Swings at
very
everything,
aggressive,
yeah.
right?
But it just seems like it's kind of like a
Mhm.
like a Javi Baez package before the total breakdown without like the speed, right? It just seems like a guy that's just swinging at everything, making good enough contact, Hitting the ball, pulling the ball, hitting fly balls. Sure, the barrel rate is low, but I think that's just because there is so many balls in play for him.
Mhm.
Right? It's not like an obscene strikeout rate with Tovar. He just swings it and so much and doesn't walk that, the denominator for barrel rate for him is going to be lower. He hits the ball hard enough. It's not elite, like the quality of contact doesn't jump off the page. And it just seems like there was I remember Tovar being a really interesting prospect, and hitters that could hit at all in the Rocky system get a hype because half their
Mhm.
home games are in Coors Field. So, and then once it came up and we got small sample stats that we could use for Tovar, like plate discipline, like O swing, like swing rate, they were all bad. And I think the whole industry sort of was out on Tovar, despite a decent rookie performance, right? Like he had an
Yeah.
OPS like close to
814 or I'm sorry.
close to 800 last year. Like he did pretty good. He held his
700.
own for a rookie. Like look at all these rookie hitters that come up and struggle. Tovar did fine. And I think it was probably overlooked that he could take this second step, and he is. And despite the fact that some of these discipline metrics aren't going to be good for him, I really like and would really target Tovar if you need help at all in any shortstops. Like it's going to be hot in Coors. They're going to play a bunch of home games in the second half as they do because they try to not play at Coors in April when it could snow.
Mhm.
They have a 10-game homestand coming up, I think, Colorado, which is exciting
Mhm.
always. So I think Tovar is like a great buy high candidate for someone that may have drafted them late. And that's also found money. Like guys that add these players that added Profar, drafted Tovar late, that is found money. So they have excess somewhere. I doubt that Tovar was your first shortstop drafted
Mhm.
in 12-team leagues. So
Yeah.
it can be attainable.
Yeah, and Tovar, I mean, so just quick correction. Last season was 700 OPS, but you're right.
Okay.
It was
Okay.
still 15 homers, 11 steals last year, 253 average. This year, obviously, like half the plate appearances, 11 home runs already. He's got 4 steals, but he's hitting 292. My question, Steve, is like, he's one where you're seeing two different stories because like over on Savant, you got XBA at 239 versus his 292. And then his slug is also quite a bit lower or higher than his expected slug. So some of those like traditional things say you could probably expect quite a bit of regression. But then when you're looking at the spreadsheet that you have here, there are some really good process things like the ground ball rate is extremely low. The fly ball rate is extremely high, which is a great thing in
He's a pull
Coors.
fly ball guy. Like all of his home runs are these pull fly balls. So
That's
that's
a good point. And
good.
that'll miss Savant a little bit, right?
Mhm,
So
mhm.
that's like Bregman
So
and Chris Bryant
and
mold.
and Paredes, the king of that.
That's right. So yeah, Tovar is an interesting one. Just kind of scanning.
He's an elite fielder, so like you don't have to worry about that. But yeah,
Mhm.
he chases a lot. He swings and misses a ton. He strikes out a lot. Does not walk, but he has a good sweet spot percentage. Does barrel the ball enough, and gets the most out of those barrels and this batted ball profile. So I'm kind of in on Tovar just being a guy that sort of breaks the mold and is of this savant,
Yeah.
pickle that we get ourselves into and square peg, into a round hole. Like there's other ways that it could work.
Mhm.
It's the exception. It's not the rule, but this seems like sort of
A good
an Isaac
exception.
Paredes light.
Well, he's a really good one because again, he's not as he hasn't been as dominant, so to speak, as Profar or
Mhm.
Ozuna. Like I think he's kind of even attainable from this list. But I just wanted to throw out that the other one that kind of jumps out in terms of like everything looks really good, and this is a guy that we really liked not too long ago, and that's Christian Walker on the list, who finds himself hitting 251 on the average, a 783 OPS, 12 homers. but last year, 33 homers, 11 steals, 258. And Walker's one that, like, yeah, it's been solid, but it's not unattainable. And the zone swing looks great. The barrel's up at like 15 and change, not too far behind like a Marcelo Ozuna. So yeah, I think Christian Walker is another one when it seems like first base, we'll talk about it a little bit later, has been kind of a struggling position where, to me, I look at his fly ball rates, the barrel rates, everything, and say, it seems like we're going to have another big year from Christian Walker, and it's not unattainable right now. So that's the only other one I wanted to call out on the buy highs. Not sure if you got anything else to add
He's
there.
striking out a bit more, but all of his quality contract metrics look even better than they did in 2022 when we were like all over Christian Walker, when at this point he was like just being added onto teams after like a super unlucky under 200 first 2 months of the season as far as like batting average, with like, not that many homers, and he ended up going on to hit the 36 homers he did in 2022 and hit 242, where like for the first half he was under 200. Like he did an amazing job to sort of bring it up, and all of those things, all of the barrel rate, the hard hit, the launch angle sweet spot, the chase rate, are all better than they were. Sorry, not the chase rate, but no, the barrel rate, the average exit velocity, the hard hit are all better than what they were in 2022 and 2023 even. So I think it's a great opportunity. Again, I consider it a buy high because he's performing well, but it's still an OPS that's below 800. That is definitely well above league. It's 27% above league average. That's crazy. Speaks to the offensive environment. A 783 OPS is it's almost 30% better than the league average. But it's someone that I think is going to have a much better second half or last 4 months of the season, or 3.5 months of the season.
Well, we will hit on some buy lows and also look at some of those more traditional kind of X stats next to actual stats, and of course get to the mailbag, but we got to take our first ad break. We'll be right back after this. So Steve, jumping over to the buy lows, I'll kind of list these off as well, and then we can cherry pick the ones that are interesting. But from the list, we have Alex Bregman, Matt Olson, Manny Machado, Bo Bichette, Gleyber Torres, Julio Rodriguez, Austin Riley, Corbin Carroll, Nolan Jones, and I think I skipped over Yordan Alvarez as well. So this is where kind of your higher draft capital guys are at. But some of them have been struggling for so long, or even coming off of seasons where it didn't look that good and you were kind of looking for a bounce back. These ones also feel attainable, and you might have to be honest about, hey, I'm coming in, I'm paying for the buy low. Maybe these guys, I would say it's a bonus if these players are rostered by teams that are in the bottom third of the league, because then it's always kind of
they need to
a fair argument that they need production. Yeah, they need production.
or they need the 3-for-1 trade to sort of address multiple areas on their roster, right?
Yep. Yeah, totally. But any names that jump out here? I know we talked about Bregman before. It seemed like he started warming up, but it's still kind of a buy low. Bichette is one that I think was in a couple of my queries on the Savant page, that it looks like there's a bounce back there from X slug standpoint. But what jumps out at you with these guys, Steve?
Yeah, I think we can cross Jordan off the list. He's hit a bunch of homers in the last few days and falls into like the judge category of like, yeah, I'm not trading Jordan Alvarez. Like if there's any opportunity, maybe you could have got him a week or so ago, but I don't think that's fair. Matt Olson is one to me that jumps off the page. Like everything that Matt Olson does is pretty much in line. He's hitting the ball hard 50% of the time. He's hitting the ball in the air. He's pulling the ball. He has just a 13% homer to fly ball rate, which is unusual for him. Sure, there is some swing and miss in his game, but it's not a crazy high strikeout rate. Like he hasn't regressed to like the this over 30% Matt Olson that we saw when he hit, a bunch of home runs, and batted 195 like he did in 2020, or even his first year in Atlanta when he hit 240. Yeah, it's a little bit elevated at 26%, but there's not much going on under the hood that's super, super concerning. He's not chasing much more. The swing strike rate is up only 0.02% from last year. So I think that's a decent sign. The Bauer rate is a little is lower. For him, it's the lowest that it's been since 2018. But in 2018, he's still at 20 homers or 29 homers with an 11.5% Bauer rate. It's at 12 now. But with that hard hit rate, and the Braves just massively underperforming and just betting on them as a team to bounce back. Sure, we're not going to get the 54 that we got last year, but I think that it's going to be a better batting average season 2022 for him. Like it'll be 250, 255 with 35 homers. So that's like 25 homers the rest of the way, 26 homers the rest of the way.
And he hit one tonight as
Yeah,
well. So
yeah.
it's like,
So
it could just be a matter of timing on, well, not only on us doing the show June 12th, but also like hitter timing for a guy that's like that locked in when it seems like really just like the hard hit and the barrel have come down a little bit. To me, I just wonder, like, is it basically like one small tweak before they get their timing right and suddenly they go on a binge like we've seen with Yordan Alvarez in the past week. So yeah, I think that's Olson's a really good one. Of course, that one is one of the pricier ones that you'd have to really pay up on. A question I have, Steve, if we could just dive in a little bit.
his homer to fly ball is 12.5%. His career homer to fly ball is 21.5%. Like,
Well, there you go. There you
that's
go.
enough for me to just buy.
Yes, absolutely. I want to talk about Corbin Carroll because he's got 2 home runs. He's hitting 213 on the season with the 609 OPS. And this was a top 5, top 6 pick. So I mean, is it as simple as us kind of scratching our heads and wondering if he's kind of playing through something? If you're a Carroll manager, you got to be so frustrated at this point that I think it warrants the discussion of what we see that we like, if anything, because yeah, I mean, this is far and away probably the worst performer on the list and far and away the most expensive guy on the list in terms of draft price, along with like a Julio Rodriguez. But just looking at the charts, Steve, it's like the contact rate still looks good. The plate discipline stuff looks good, but it's basically where's the pop? Like the barrel, the hard hit is very, very low. What do we think here for Corbin Carroll? Like, are we at a point where we'd be pumped about 15 homers on the season?
I think so. But I've been encouraged, especially recently, with Corbin Carroll. I have up on the screen his
Nice.
rolling hard hit percentage by game and his WOBA, and it is just a arrow up. He's figuring out how to hit the ball hard again. It seems so. I take that as a sign of him getting more comfortable figuring it out. Whether he was battling through something early is kind of speculation, but I mean, I think it could be assumed that the shoulder was still bothering him, and maybe it wasn't hurting, but it was affecting his timing, affecting his swing. Like that's why a shoulder injury is so scary. But it does look like Carroll's starting to figure it out and starting to hit the ball hard, and it has been. You know, there's been some results for him as well, right?
Yeah.
If you game log him, I think he had a triple and a double last night. He's had
10 hits in his
yeah.
last 6 games, it looks like.
Yeah. There's 2 3-hit games in his last 6 games, a 2-hit game. Sure, the homers aren't there, and yes, I think we do have to adjust our expectations and sort of bank on maybe 15 homers this year. But
So
I think as he starts,
Bo Bichette. Yeah, Bo Bichette
yeah,
type of season.
yeah. But I think as he starts to hit the ball harder, he'll get on base more, he'll get more hits, and the steals will come. And I think he will still finish with like 30 to 35 steals, maybe a 250 average if he can get super hot, with 12 homers. It's, it's still a really good fantasy line at the end of the year. Maybe not the 6th overall pick, but someone that I think you can get a lot of value out of for the rest of the way.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. Again, that list, if you guys want to go out and dig a little bit deeper, was Jordan Alvarez, Alex Bregman, Matt Olson, Manny Machado, Bo Bichette, Gleyber Torres, Julio Rodriguez, Austin Riley, Corbin Carroll, and Nolan Jones, all buy lows. Steve, any other ones from that list that you want to note? Otherwise, I was going to kind of race through these other lists that we have here, and then I know we got to get to some mailbag
No,
questions.
let's keep it moving. We'll get to the mailbag. Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. So just to rattle off, save you guys a query search, but the buy lows by batting average versus XBA. These were kind of cherry picked names near the top of the list that seemed relevant, but Josh Naylor, 224 average, 278 XBA. Christopher Morel was on both of these lists, but a 208 average, a 264 XBA. Swiped a bag today as well. Francisco Lindor, who just hit a home run like 10 minutes ago, a 231 average, a 277 XBA. Lane Thomas is one that it seems like this year is looking better, where last year it looked like he was overperforming. But this year, a 222 average, a 265 XBA for Lane Thomas. CJ Abrams, 245 average, 286 XBA. Vinny P, a 239 average, 276 XBA. So, yeah, some of these, like you said, Steve, there's rules and exceptions. You got to take any of this stuff with a grain of salt. You see Lars Nootbaar on there, and it's like, yeah, for now, 2.5, 3 years, we're thinking Lars Nootbaar is the best player on the planet. So you kind of have to do further research after that. But at least these are the ones that should make you look twice and go see, where's that manager? What does he need? Does it fit with my team? And can we make a deal? Just some quick X slug ones. Again, Christopher Morel was near the top of this list with a 403 slug and a 502 X slug. Lindor was also there, 402 and a 492. And then Corey Seager with a great 472, but an even better 561 X slug. And he came back tonight from that, week-long absence with the hamstring issue. So food for thought there. Not sure if you want to add anything, Steve. Otherwise, we got some fresh mailbag questions waiting in the wings here.
Just an interesting note. The Cubs, as a team, are the 4th unluckiest as far as xWOBA. And 2 of those teams ahead of them were the Marlins and the White Sox, which their xWOBA was still horrible compared to what their actual WOBA is. So, like, of actual real MLB teams, they were second, only behind the Mets. Sorry, Mets, LOL Mets. They're just gonna run into something, get astray somehow every episode if we wanted to do that. But yeah, I think it's underrated in the fact that when it gets warm in Wrigley, just like in Colorado, and the winds start blowing out, it becomes much more of a hitter park in the summer. So I think a lot of the Cubs in general are good buy lows. There was an article today, I think, by Dalton Deladon about just pairs of buy low hitters, and Cody Bellinger and Christopher Morel were on there. And
Suzuki,
I think that,
probably.
Yeah. I think you can get some of these shares, with Morel's slash line. I know the homers and steals have been there. There's points where he may have been dropped, even with Suzuki, with some of the injuries that he's been battling too. So I think it's it's not Coors, but it definitely is a better hitter's park in the summer when it's hot. So that's a good thing to keep in mind with these Cub hitters.
Yeah, great point. Well, we got the mailbag, and we're excited to talk through a few fun questions, but we're going to take our second ad break, and we'll be right back after this. All right, so Steve, leading it off here with a little piranha from the Discord. He's a frequent mailbagger for WAF, probably our one seed in that category. But Little Piranha asks, in a weekly redraft league with limited yearly transactions, either because of no $0 fab bids or there's actually a transaction limit, does it make sense to wait to replace an injured player until there is a free agent that I'm certain I want to roster? Side note, just Van speaking here, I totally agree with this. And I've had the same question of like, oh man, like, do I wait? Do I wait? Or is it better to just jump and throw somebody in the slot? His example is he lost Alec Manoa. He could pick up Hurston Waldrep, but he would just become his first drop if someone better comes along. So I feel like I'd be wasting my fab, is what he says. So Steve, I'll let you take the first crack. I've got my thoughts as well, but it is a great question.
In weekly leagues, like NFBC, unless it's like a pure injury stat, especially when there's no IL, right? I don't think Little Piranha is referring to a situation like that specifically, but I think it's important to not have dead
Zero.
roster spots on your team. But not all leagues are like that. NFBC is pretty unique. And I'm tend to have a focus towards my home leagues, which are like 7 or 8 ad limits a week. You can use them at any time. The free agent pool is first comes, first serve, and then there's waivers for the guys that are dropped. I know that's probably pretty unique, especially with the first come, first serve portion. We sort of limit that by having an ads limit. I don't run into that situation. Like I try to save an ad for the end of the week for matchup purposes, but also like when my team's doing well, like the goal is to not use those ads, right? Unless you're trying to add a hitter for like a light Thursday or Tuesday or something like that. Ideally you're not streaming because you don't need to because your pitching staff's good enough. But I think that's a good thought process to have, right? Like if you do have to, if you can't have $0 bids, if you have a waiver order priority, like is it like I think you could have to sort of approach things like that, right? It's like if this was a waiver order priority, am I okay with moving down the priority for adding Hurston Waldrep? I think it's dependent on context too. Like, do you need this pitcher? Do you need sort of a young arm that could potentially be something more? I just think it gives you something to second guess and maybe not just blindly add Waldrep because he's like the sexy new name that comes up. Like if there's something that you really need, maybe wait. And if you could survive with someone like Alec Manoah on your roster, it's just another consideration to have. And I think it's a really, really good aspect to think of it. Like, I don't think it's the end of the world if you do. But I would just make sure that you put in a $1 bid. And if you lose out on them, it's no big deal. Right. Like that's sort of a way to, I think, lower your opportunity cost there. Cause you're fine to drop Waldrep if you only spent $1 on him. Right. It's no big deal. But if you spent 5 or 6, now we're talking about going into your budget for like 2 stream guys, right? Start guys that you want to stream.
Yeah, I think that's, the context is everything in terms of where you're at in the standings, even in terms of how, if it's just like a timed first come, first serve free agent league, how quick are you on the draw? You know what I mean? Because if you always are faster than your league mates, then it does kind of encourage you to wait because you can be first to pounce. But if it's, fab, obviously that makes it a little bit different. Like it sounds like it is. I would say like what comes to mind too is one, the $1 bids, like you're saying, Steve. 2, the type of players should always be those stream and see what happens type of guys, because you just never know when you're gonna strike there. So I like to view those as, if it's gonna be a rental, give me somebody that I think could turn into something, right? And I think that's where Waldrop kind of makes sense for it. But yeah, I think those are all good thoughts.
If it is Waldrop, it's like worth it to hold for the 2, like, right? Like if he comes out and deals this week, it's like, all right, cool. I spent $1 on him and
it's not Miles Michaelis, right?
But like I don't know. Like I added Gavin Sheets for a game. He plays tomorrow or whatever. Like you don't have to necessarily do that, right? Sometimes it's better not even to take the over 4 potentially, right? So
Mhm.
I think it's good consideration and a good lens to put on adding these guys and roster churning at the bottom of the road, right? And Prawn is super sharp and always thinks of these sort of angles, and I think it's a good mindset to have. So I don't know if we're like not answering this question by saying, yeah, it's good to think about it that way, but um, it is,
I
and
would
it just
vote
makes sense.
don't. I would vote don't wait though, and that's coming from my
I would
home
lean
league.
that way too. I would lean that way
My
too, but
home league is even more costly, Steve, because as you know,
you have
anyone
to
that
hold for
we
2 weeks,
add,
right?
you have to hold a pitcher for now we shorten it to 10 days or a hitter for 1 week. So it's like if you add somebody on Wednesday, you're missing any weekend breakout or anything like that. And I still feel like my philosophy over the years has been like add what seems interesting on the wire right now. You could wait 2 or 3 weeks for, gosh, I waited 7 weeks for Vinny Pasquantino to get called up that one time. And it's like, that's a dangerous game to play for how much you're missing on
Yeah.
these guys that pop up out of nowhere. So,
Yeah, sort of like a value at $1 today, right?
it is. It
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
So, okay, moving along to another one. This was on Twitter at peep my slash line, and a couple ones here, but this is great. And by the way, Steve, does it get any better than when we hear from someone we haven't that says like, always love listening to the show. It
Nothing
makes
beats
our
it.
day.
Yeah.
So, uh, what we got here is stupid wins column is killing me. Looking at the W leaderboard, there's a lot of unexpected names in the top 25. What's WAF's thought on win column in 2024? Always enjoy the pod. Thank you very much for tuning in. Of course, that was from Dynasty Junkie is the Twitter name there. But Steve, it is a painful column. It's one that I consider on draft day more than I consider in my regular season management. Of course, there's a little bit of a boost for guys who either go long into games or obviously the teams column. But to his point, looking at like the top 25 of wins, you got Ranger Suarez up at the top, Seth Lugo and Carlos Rodon tied for second. Looking at some other kind of random names in there, you got like Gavin Stone, Mitch Keller, Marcus Stroman. So yeah, it's a Cal Quantrill is up there as well. How do you view the wins column? I'll give you first go at this one as well.
Yeah. The how I view the wins column is that I don't know anything about the wins column.
Mm-hmm.
Like I in season, I have no idea um who is the wins leaderboard. And I guess I should pay attention to it more, especially in Roto, because it is an important category. And it's so hard to get wins because guys could deal and
Ronaldo Lopez been
yeah, and not get a win.
185 ERA on the Braves, and he has 3 wins.
Yeah, yeah. So or like Reese Olson when he was dealing in the first few weeks of the season, it was like 0-4 with like a 1 ERA. What it does tell me is that I want guys on good teams, and maybe that should be more of a tiebreaker for me. Like Ranger Suarez was in like a grouping of like guys that were bunched into a pack of pitchers that you could have taken a flyer on. Like that question that Little Piranha posed a few years ago. It's like, if you have this group of guys and you just pick the wrong one, is it still a wrong process? Maybe we talked about having better tiebreakers. Maybe a tiebreaker for the wins column should be a better team like the Phillies, and you would have got more shares of Ranger Suarez, of Carlos Rodon, if that was a flyer that you wanted to take. Zach Wheeler, if you take an early pitcher, like that could be a tiebreaker, like the only pitchers on here that aren't on like great teams have been like pretty dominant as far as like Tariq Skubal and Mitch Keller, who's been lights out since the calendar turned to May, right? Like those are really the only guy. And Mitch Keller's like a guy that's a veteran that has a lot of innings too, right? So that's another thing that you can expect. Seth Lugo's probably the biggest surprise, but also another like, it's crazy to say Seth Lugo's like this, but he's like an innings eater that since he was a change return reliever. But it's something that I think should be considered more, and maybe it's like what is the 10 like Rich Suarez has 10 wins. Like, all right, yeah, like what am I gonna do about that in season? But I think it's something to consider out of season, and maybe something to target in trades too, like target hitters on better teams as like a tiebreaker sort of thing. Or like guys that are the inning eaters on bad teams, like Cal Quantrill has 6 wins. Like, yeah, it's Colorado, but he's a guy that's going to go 5-6 innings pretty much every time. He has a new pitch that's been pretty good, or really good, with the splitter. So that could be someone out there that you can just sort of add. I know it can be frustrating. I don't pay attention. Like, I don't really pay attention to ERA and wins, but they're two of the three.
Let me throw. I know.
Categories, right?
I know. To throw out one other thing, though, if you venture on over to the pitcher list stat leaderboards and you go over to the standard column, you can sort guys by innings per game. And I think that is another thing in addition to team context. I know Nick always kind of calls out innings per start, but like Seth Lugo is number 3 on that leaderboard list at 6.5 innings. So it's like, obviously Captain Obvious here with the longer they go in the games, the better chance they have at winning. But I just think that's a stat that I personally never pay attention to, Steve. But guess who's 15th here? Mitch Keller. So it's like, these are guys. Tyler Anderson's there. There's been years where he had like 20 wins and everybody was like, how did Tyler Anderson? So maybe there's something to putting a little bit more credence on innings per start if you're trying to chase this as a category.
Yeah, like Michael Lorenzen, Kyle Gibson, Jake Irvin,
never look at it, man.
Jose Barrios. Like, those are good guys to target for wins. I think that's a great tool. The innings per game. Yeah. So it's on the pitchers leaderboard, starters, and then standard. It's the third column over, like game starting innings per game, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And that's, something that we, like you said, Steve, it's so true. Like, you think about K rate and K minus BB throughout a season, but like trying to quantify it, what we generally would say is kind of a dumb category, or one that isn't as skill based as quality start, things like that. It's still a category, and you got to deal with it. You got to account for it. So that's a great question there. The other follow-up question that we had from Pete My Slash Line was hurting for stolen bases, picked up Ryan Bliss uncontested. I also roster Jorge Mateo. Seems Bliss might be due for regular at bats. Can Bliss be who we wanted Mateo to be? So Ryan Bliss, let's just go check it out here, Steve. Sprint speed, 80th percentile, game logging, like he says. Yeah, it looks like we have been seeing like regular ABs here, but I'm only seeing it's been like a good week and a half since we've got a steal. There were 2 in one game. Overall, so far, we're seeing that he's hitting 200. And nothing. The sample sizes are very small at 35 plate appearances, so we should probably check out his minor numbers. But what are your thoughts on Ryan Bliss, if he can be kind of a new Mateo?
Yeah, Jorge Polanco is hurt. He played most of the time at second base, and Ryan Bliss has the second most time at second base for the Mariners. I'm wondering, though, if Dylan Moore, who just went on the paternity list, slides in and takes over at second base for the Mariners once he is back. That would be my biggest question mark as far as his playing time goes. So I don't know if the playing time is as solid as it seems for Bliss. I know Mateo sort of has carved out a role doing that, and Bliss does have 3 steals in just 35 plate appearances. So the intent is there, despite the sprint speed that's good, but doesn't jump off the page. I am just concerned about his playing time once
Moore's back from
Moore is back from paternity leave. Just looking at their depth chart, right, is Josh Rojas at third, JP Crawford at short. DH is plugged up by Mitch Haniger. They also have Cal Riley and Mitch Garver. Mitch Garver plays some DH too. They just signed Victor Robles. It's a very easy lineup to crack. It seems like that's the pushback I would give myself, right? Like there's Dominic Canzone, who I know has some nice power, but is probably more of a lefty platoon bat. Even Luke Raley, who has done some nice things this month, is more of probably a part-time playing guy, strong side of the platoon. So there definitely is opportunity, and I think Bliss has played in other spots. He played second base, shortstop, and DH at AAA.
Mhm.
So, I don't think they would be afraid to slide him over to third, potentially if he has the arm, or even the outfield too, if he's that good of an athlete. So maybe there's some other ways to get him in there. He was a second round pick, so there is some pedigree there.
28 steals in 50
Yeah,
games in AAA.
7 homers too, so
The plate
not
discipline looked
non-zero
really good.
power. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess as long as the playing time's there, yeah, this could be a really good deep league speed option. I just question if the playing time is going to be fully there for him.
Yeah, I'm curious. I don't have it. I'm on mobile, but do you have kind of his grades on like power, speed grades, like his prospect grades up
Yes, I
on
do.
Fangraphs?
I'm on the new player pages on Fangraphs. It's a 35-50 future hit tool, 30-40 game power, 45-45 raw power, 55-55 speed, 40-50 fielding. So like pretty
Okay,
middling. He was a 40 future value, the 16th ranked prospect in the Mariners organization. So
but a lot of
uh,
intent on the base paths in the minors, though, and
yeah,
so far in the
yeah,
majors. So probably
that speaks a lot more, I think, to me than some of the scouting grades. He did have 10 homers and 20 steals too last year at
right.
AAA. So
That's a good name there. Yeah, so appreciate that.
sorry,
Writing in
11
from
and 25 because he was traded midseason last year from the Diamondbacks.
Okay, nice. Yeah, little guy, 5'7". So that's a good name there, Ryan Bliss. And appreciate Dynasty Junkie sending that in. Bliss, for anybody tuning in, curious, is just 1% rostered in like Yahoo League. So probably a really good kind of speed focused ad for deeper NFBC type of leagues. Steve, rounding it out, we got the Goon Squad, man. We had to close with them, but this one came from Gamba089, proud member of the WAF Listener League. Goon Squad wins above Van. They are above me in the standings as well. I left Chris Paddock on the bench this week. I don't want to talk about it.
Oof.
So they ask why.
Yeah, I'm making a climb up fifth
You are.
now in our listening league, representing the pod pretty well.
Yeah, better than me. So their question simply, why does first base suck so bad? They had dropped in a photo of the American League All-Star break or All-Star voting, and it is something else, Steve. Like you look at this, it's got the stats here on what we're looking at. I think there's only one, maybe two that have an 800 OPS. And that's Tristan Casas, who hasn't had a full slate, but like Vlad, a 778 OPS, Ty France, Nathaniel Lowe, Mountcastle is the one with an 812 OPS. But then you got Josh Naylor, a 794, Vinny P, 739, Rizzo, Carlos Santana, Nolan Shanwell, John Singleton, who is a first baseman with a 649 OPS for the Astros. It's just like Torkelson, awful. Andrew Vaughn, awful. I don't know how we make sense of this, Steve, but it just is a reminder that like it's not our 2014 fantasy baseball, right? Like outfield feels thin, middle infield feels loaded, first base feels like contact hitters. Like I don't know how to make sense of it, but it is part the environment, right? And then the rest is kind of shrug and look at these guys and say a lot of them have to get better, right?
The number one ranked first baseman in my league. I'll give you my categories. They're hits, runs, homers, RBIs, steals, average, and OPS. I will, if you can guess who the number one first baseman is, I will buy you any pitcherless shirt from the shop right now off air. It is a player that is not primarily a first baseman. He probably got eligibility. Let me see how many games he has played there.
Is it like
He
a
has
Jake
played 2 games
Cronenworth?
at first base this year, 5 last year.
I don't know, man.
I
Cronenworth
mean, it's
does play first,
Cronenworth's
so
teammate.
it's
I'll
not.
give you.
Yeah,
I'll give that. It's pretty close. So maybe I owe you a sticker or something from the shop. It's Jerks and Profar is my league's number one
there you
ranked
go.
first base.
Yeah. Oh man.
Bryce
And that's
Harper
not
is second.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, and even Profar, like pop wise, is what like
I mean he has 10
10
homers. He's a
first? Yeah.
924 OPS. So, but I mean, as far as first baseman eligible players, he is he's tied for like fourth, fifth.
So every first baseman in the league, the ones with double-digit home runs are Pete Alonso, Jake Cronenworth with 10, Bryce Harper with 15, Christian Walker with 12,
Naylor has 17.
Naylor, Carlos Santana, Mountcastle.
Olson, and then it's guys who are eligible depending on your league settings, like Isaac Paredes, Salvador Perez, Jerks and
Fair,
Profar.
fair.
Bellinger has 9. So
25 might be, unless things change.
it's a
25
disaster.
feel
A
like the new
disaster.
30.
Yeah.
Oh man, I don't know that we even owe the Goon Squad an answer, but I mean, the environment's got to be a big part of this, right, Steve? Like it does seem like my pitchers are getting rocked more in June, and I know
Yeah, power
it,
rate's up in June too.
right.
I would be surprised if a lot of these guys didn't take off and have monster second halves. Like I could see Pete Alonso could still finish close to 40 home runs despite the lowish average. Even guys like Paul Goldschmidt, your boys are starting to heat up potentially a little bit there. But yeah, it's I guess because 2023 Matt Olson is missing. It does definitely feel more shallow, and it isn't the position that it used to be.
Yeah, let me just run one quick thing here. Let's just look at in the past 2 weeks, all first basemen. Let's see what we got here. So we got 5 homers from Ryan Mountcastle. Yeah, we're not going to really count Santander. Burleson is eligible with 4. Freddie Freeman.
How many games does Santander have at first?
It's got to be pretty low. I just pulled up on Yahoo.
He played 12 there last year, so he's probably eligible in Yahoo, but he doesn't have any there this year, and it's not like NFBC or 20 game eligible anywhere. So yeah, it's not fair to necessarily count him.
Can't include him, but Carlos Santana's got 3 pretty much in June. Vaughn does have 3. So I don't know. I mean, some of these guys are waking up, like you said, but God, even like Naylor, who's got a couple homers, just 175 average. I don't know, man. It's bleak. So
yeah,
out of curiosity, Steve, who's your home league first base?
Vlad is my home league first baseman.
I have Vlad as well, and I've got Cronenworth. So maybe that's a trade chip for me.
Yeah, there you go.
People with first. Okay, guys. Well, that wraps us up for 143. As always, you guys can write into the show. We're always happy to include topics on here. We're on Twitter at WinsAbovePod. You guys can also always email the show, winsabovefantasy@gmail.com. But yes, that signs us out for Hitters to Target and a little bit of mailbag fun. So, Steve, it was a great time as always. I'm sure we'll be keeping in touch throughout the rest of the week and the rest of June. Hopefully seeing more power production coming up here. But great show, man.
From your mouth to God's ears, right? Let the Homer binge begin.
That's it, folks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Later.